Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So this is a series of 6 conversations called Sources of Inspiration with Paramananda. The series really came out of 2 things. One was we did something last year at the height of the pandemic with Paramananda and Viveka, which was a really successful set of conversations. And the general idea with that was just to have really good friends, sort of sharing a space and in a way being intimate with their friendship, just inviting people into that sense of connection, as in a way one of the most valuable things that we have to give in Sangha to each other is just that intimacy and that, if you like, vulnerability. Just being willing to show up and take part in the weirdness of keeping connection going through the pandemic on Zoom. And it was so successful that we'd kind of had little dreams of doing sort of Netflix season 2. Unfortunately, Viveka wasn't available, but out of the conversation about that, Paramanda had an idea of talking to a wider range of friends, really, which has been a delight to put together. And so he'll say a little bit more about that in a second. I just want to rejoice in Paramanda a bit. He's been such a good friend to me personally for more years than I care to remember in terms of age, but he's also been a really great friend to Dharma Chakra, which is the team I work for that runs a lot of Triratna's online stuff. He's been amazingly supportive through the years on all sorts of levels. And particularly last year in the pandemic, just having him being so willing to show up and help do these kind of mad experiments of what does community feel like online. It's been such a joy to have a sort of partnership with him through it. So I'm really grateful to Paramanda. I'm very excited for this series because he's got some great friends and they've got some fantastic stuff to talk about. Padma I don't know particularly well at all, although we were just remembering that we were at a party together a long time ago in London. He was ordained with a very close friend of mine who was saying some good things about him. But I do know Padma art and music, and I was going to say adventuring together. A mutual friend, Kamala Sheila, introduced Padmamati's work to me as a psychogeographer, which I loved. Psychogeography is a really interesting field. Maybe we'll touch on it today. And I know Padmamati will share some of his own work with you today. But anyway, welcome to Padmamati. Again, I'll let Paramananda introduce you a bit more fully, but thanks for being willing to turn up today.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Great. So Paramanda, I'll hand everybody over to your good care for the next hour. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chandasa. When we were talking about doing this series of conversations, I started thinking I'd like to talk to people about what it is that inspires them, you know, what it is that kind of keeps them going in some whatever spiritual life that they have. And when I say spiritual life, I think I mean that in the broadest possible terms, really, because we have our kind of, we might have a formal kind of Buddhist practice, which is very inspiring practice, but there might be all other numerous sources, you know, whether for me, poetry has always played a very important part in my own journey, I suppose, along with, well, literature in general, but also when I look back on my life, I mean, I'm 66 this year. When I look back on my life, I think one of the things that caused, I was going to use the word activated me. I don't know quite why that word's come to mind, but one of the areas that activated me is friendship and love. And anyway, so I thought it'd be nice to talk to people that I know and see if we can delve a little bit into what it is we're actually trying to do, what we feel we're doing in this rather amorphous idea of a spiritual life, and what that means to us, and what we feel are the benefits and perhaps even also the pitfalls of it. So anyway, this first one, well, actually there's already one up online which I did a couple of weeks ago at the Parlour with Attila. And if you haven't listened to that, please do. I think, well, I had a very nice time talking to Attila. So that's already up there, but now we've got a further 6 that are going out live. And this first one, I'm delighted to have Padma Mati here with me. Well, he's there. Sharing the screen with me. I've known Padma Mati, I'm not sure, for over 30 years anyway. He first came along when we had a small Buddhist centre just off the Portobello Road, Colville Houses. And when he first came along, he was practicing as an architect, but he was already a musician. And it was a very particular time for West London Buddhist Centre where Padma Mati and other people came along. There was a lot of musicians, there was a lot of people involved in the art at that point, and the whole thing was quite chaotic in a sense, but also very well, I think the word is very sort of punk in the sense that we did everything ourselves. You know, it's a lot less sophisticated than it is now at most Buddhist centres. It's quite rough and ready, and but it was also very vibrant. Padma Mati is quite an exceptional guy, really, because he gave up being an architect and became a full-time musician, songwriter, composer. He's also had a very strong interest in London. I think that is a psychogeography. That's not quite the right term, is it? You know what I mean? And he's also a bit of an impresario, putting on all sorts of events around London, which we might get around to talking about. So anyway, I'm very pleased to have him here, and we'll see what unfolds. One of the things that I'm asking people that I'll be speaking to do is just to bring something along to share at the beginning of each of these conversations. So I'm going to ask Padma Mati now to just do that, and then we'll take it on from there. Okay, Padma Mati?
That's fine. Yeah, and thanks very much. Lovely to be here with you and to everybody else too. So I am going to share something. I'm not going to say anything about it until afterwards. So brace yourself, okay? It's not me. It is kind of me, but it's not. But anyway, brace yourself. Hold on. Right.
Birdland, that's what I always hear when you sigh. Never in my wordland could there be ways to reveal in a phrase how I feel. Have you ever heard two turtle doves, meal and coo, when they love? That's the kind of magic romantic music we make with our lips when we kiss. And there's a weeping old willow, hearing the man that is right. That's how I cry in my pillow. If you should tell me farewell and goodbye, lullaby of birdland whisper low.
Right, I don't know whether how much Paramanda could see of that, but that was obviously that was Ella Fitzgerald singing Lullaby of Birdland, but it sounded pretty ropey. The reason it sounded pretty ropey was that it was cut onto a bootleg record in the Soviet Union in 1957 or 8, and those images that you were seeing, they were records, like vinyl records made on X-rays. In the Soviet Union. And the reason I showed them, and I wanted to start off, was two things really, is that I spent a lot of time over the last 5 years telling the story of those records and the people who made them, because that music was forbidden in the Soviet Union. And the way that they managed to share the music that they loved, including lots of Russian music and Western jazz and rock and roll, was by bootlegging it onto used X-rays. It's a very strange story, and but also I wanted to play it because it's Ella Fitzgerald, and I've got a particular connection with Ella Fitzgerald myself, so I thought that was quite a nice way to start us off, Paramananda.
Very nice. It's funny, you know, my father was obsessed with Ella Fitzgerald. He was quite keen on Sarah Vaughan, but he was obsessed with Ella Fitzgerald. So I was brought up, the records I heard as a kid was Ella and Sarah Vaughan. That was it. They used to have a reel-to-reel tape recorder, you know, loads and loads of different Ella.
There's something, I mean, interesting, because, you know, when I was a kid, that's the music that I heard from my dad and grandfather as well, I guess. And it was the sound of that kind of music through the wall, that kind of the distant sound of it, that actually stuck in my mind many years later when I actually came to start making music myself. And there's something about Ella's voice, which is, it sort of dances somehow. There's something magical about it.
One of the things that was incredible about Ella Fitzgerald is when she was older, I mean, she was in quite bad health, wasn't she? She was nearly blind. Did she lose a leg? Anyway, she still, you'd hear her sing, she still sounded like a young woman, you know. Her voice was just fantastic, you know. I mean, even when she was really in a bad way, you know.
Right, and I think also there's something about her too. I mean, she's one of the people that James Hillman mentions in the Soul's Code.
That's right, yeah.
As somebody who's calling, let's call it that, or sort of daemon. You know, was there from the beginning, because actually she was at a competition as a dancer, and actually for some reason on the day she decided to sing instead, and it was a bit like, you know, something stepped in and history was made.
Yeah, it's a Harlem club, wasn't it? What was that club called in Harlem where they used to have they had a talent competition every week, didn't they? Yeah. And her mum pushed wanted her to go up and dance, and then she just started singing instead. Amazing story, yeah.
So I think, yeah, there's something special about that record, and you know, like I said, for me, you know, that's been a big part of the last 5 years, is actually telling that story, you know, as well of we live in a time when, you know, thank heavens, we live in a time when music is completely free, really. You don't have to pay for it anymore, hardly, and also we've got nothing to restrict us, but those records come from a time when, you know, to own a record like that and to make a record like that, you face quite a lot of danger. And I think that there's something precious about that as well, you know, and the fact that they're made on X-rays, of course, makes it more, even more so, you know.
Yes, it's a strange metaphor. Well, not a metaphor because I actually did it, but there's something sort of strange, isn't there, about casting a record onto an X-ray.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a picture of damage, you know, overlaid with the sounds of pleasure, and also it's a picture of the inside of somebody which is impressed with the music which they secretly loved. So there's it's a sort of very intense kind of pushing together of two things. So I was really pleased when you were talking about when you mentioned early West London days, and you said punk, because actually there was something of the punk spirit then in West London, and actually these records were quite punk. They were made on the street. They were street material, street trash, like, and I love that too. That, you know, they weren't high culture; they were low culture in a way. Although you could say you can't get higher than Ella Fitzgerald.
Yes, I mean those early days in West London, I think there was this do-it-yourself thing, wasn't there? You know what I mean? That people just mucked in, and the whole thing was a lot more rough and ready in them days. And in a way, there was a lot more. Well, I don't know how to put it. I don't know if experimentation is the right word, but a sense of being. Well, I don't know how it was from your perspective, of course, because you just came along, didn't you? I was already a chair, wasn't I, when you came along, I think.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it was very exciting times. I mean, it was quite liberating. I mean, I feel fortunate that I came to West London and met you, because I think if I'd gone to a more formal setting, I'm not sure I would have stuck necessarily, but that kind of slightly anarchic, yeah, you're a bit of an anarchist, I think, and you know, the way you were living there was just sort of, for me anyway, was quite. I felt quite at home, I suppose. There's a strange echo. I don't know if anybody else can hear that, but so I'm very appreciative of that, actually, and that I met you at that time. I was coming very much from a kind of, you know, being inspired by the beat at that time, reading the beat, you know. So I think if I'd gone somewhere that was a bit more formal, I'm not sure I would have stuck around.
No, and you were part of that never-ending Vajradeepa study group, weren't you? Remember?
Yeah, I mean, I went to. So what happened is that I came to London. I wasn't never actually an architect, by the way. I was working for an architect, but I went to. It was the time also when it was a bit of an economic difficult time. So we signed up for lots of courses, arts courses and stuff, and one of them was meditation course at the City Lit, which is in central London. And that's, believe it or not, actually the very same class, the same meditation class. That's where I met Martin and Sophie from Tiger Lilies.
Oh, is that where you met them? I didn't realise.
I met them at the Tiger Lilies and by the way, if anybody doesn't know who the Tiger Lilies are, Tiger Lilies are a kind of, they're a wonderful, very strange castrati, cabaret, Brechtian sort of circus outfit, a bit like Tom Waits, very successful. And that's why I actually met them at Vajradeepa's class. And we did his class for 2 terms. And then when that class ended, we came over to West London, and that's where we met you.
Yeah, yeah.
So my association with West London right from the beginning was with music and chaos.
I was wondering what, you know, your music, how that, if, I don't know if it does or has, well, I'm sure it has in some way or other, how that crossed over with, well, as I say, I don't know. I don't really like the word spiritual life, really, but I don't know what other term to use. Really, I suppose I'm asking what role music has played for you in your own life. I mean, it's an odd question because obviously you're a musician, so.
Yeah. Well, actually, I used spiritual life to avoid it for a long time, and I think that really let's call it the kind of creative life. I don't want that to sound poncy, but
No,
that actually I think has probably been the most important thing for me, and I did get lost actually in what one might call the spiritual life, trying to avoid that muse actually, because it's quite difficult in some respects, and there was for quite a long time actually, really until I came back after being ordained, and I had a kind of let's call it a sort of psychotic breakdown, a breakthrough, or epiphany, or whatever you want to call it. I was actually, at that time, I think I was using the inverted commas spiritual life to avoid dealing with my muse. And really that kind of, rather, it felt catastrophic at the time, but in retrospect was a gigantic gift. What happened then, it took that actually for me to take it seriously and give it the respect that it deserved.
This is so interesting for me to hear that, Padma, because I do wonder quite a lot to what extent we can use things like meditation to actually avoid what we might call a calling. You know, if you say your muse, that's your calling, isn't it, in the Hillman sense, or in the shamanic sense as well. And we find, you know, and yet we can sort of misuse meditation or a spiritual practice in that sense of, as you say, trying to avoid our calling.
I think so, and I mean, this is me personally. I'm not blaming anybody else or anything else for it. It was my thing, and actually, mythically speaking, you know, I was a young narcissistic man, you know, or boy, really, and it's interesting. I was thinking about the myth of Narcissus, and you know, in the story, Echo, you know, who falls in love with him and, you know, wants to be entangled with him, wants him to pay attention to her. What does she do? She calls to him. She's calling, right? I mean, in a way, she is his calling, because actually what he needs to do is get dirty, you know, get down and dirty. And, you know, he ignores her. And what happens, you know, is that she becomes disembodied, just becomes a voice. So the calling is there's no way of becoming embodied or incarnate. And what happens to him? He just withers away himself. He's a beautiful body that gets older, and almost like in fast forwards to the end. And I sort of see that myth in some ways these days as about that, you know, sort of, if you ignore the calling, Echo in that story, then what happens? Well, Nemesis comes, actually, in his case. It's his nemesis. And I think that I would feel very fortunate in some way that Nemesis came to me just in time. And that I sort of was given a second chance in some way to take that calling more seriously. I think in my own terms, it's interesting because what Echo is about sound, right? She's a voice. And what's he about? He's about reflection and looking, isn't he?
Mm.
And there's something about the voice and the music, that is, in that story anyway, is much more important. I mean, sound comes before image, doesn't it, for us? We hear before we can see, and they say that sound is the last sense to go. And we can easily get lost in our own shallowness. So I feel really extremely fortunate that I was able to, get in contact with that. And it goes on. I'm talking as though like I mastered it or something. Christ, I mean, no, absolutely not. So that was a very long answer to your question.
Well, no, that's fine. Yeah. No, but when you say I'm quite interested in this whole, well, for obvious reasons, because I'm losing my sight, I'm quite interested in the whole visual versus audio sort of metaphor, if you like, and how our culture is increasingly visual, isn't it? Well, I feel it is, but we've moved into an increasingly kind of visual culture, and somehow the visual always puts us at a distance in a different sort of way. There's a kind of distance in it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, totally. And I think that, I mean, we live in a visual culture, as you say, right? In previous times, I don't want to get into, things were better in the old days, but we used to live in an oral and an aural culture, a culture which was either about story or about song or about music, but even actually about radio, I mean, I played that record from, Ella Fitzgerald, and it was, in a way, it's from the golden age of radio. I still love radio. I mean, I've got a radio show, which is, but I love radio for that reason, is that actually it's sort of, because it allows you to make the own images in your mind. And I'm thinking with you, because obviously you're losing your sight, I'm guessing that the audible, the story, the sound, the music must be more and more of your world, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. That even now, when if I go out for a walk these days, I'm much more aware of the sound and the visual. It's more as that I'm constructing the world through sound these days more than visually. I've got a friend who's I've been going for walks with in Hyde Park early in the morning now and then. We go there, and it's really interesting. They have the household cavalry. I don't know who it is anyway. They have some military, there was the stables there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
But the soldiers are no longer yet there, but the horses are still there, and they do their stuff in the park. They train in the park, and I can't really see it, but the noise they make is just, well, this is just one example, the noise they make is really amazing, the horses, or, the sound of the horses on the earth and the jingling of their bridles, and anyway, it's just very much a world of sound, really, more and more. Quite a different way of being in the world, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the city itself, of course. I mean, if you think about it, the city itself, I mean, we probably don't think about that much in the way that you're talking about, but we do construct the city in our mind, often through sounds, actually. I think subconsciously, that's how we sort of feel what time of day it is, right? And, there's something wonderful about the soundscape of a city as well, isn't there? It's something. It's
Yeah. So, reeling back a bit with your, so there must have been some inclination, or you did get involved with Buddhism and meditation and stuff, didn't you? So that was presumably not just an avoidance, was it? Or
no, absolutely not. And I didn't mean to imply that. What I mean is that, so when I came along to West London, in the days at the beginning that I told you about, it wasn't then. I mean, I think that was very much part of it, and we were doing stuff. But I sort of, as time went on, I think I kind of went off the track a little bit, and it was a kind of young man thing as well, I think, and I needed. It took what I call anima initiations to kind of get me back on track, and for me, I see that as part of the spiritual life. Spiritual movement, and so it's not that like Dharma or meditation weren't important in that. In fact, I think that actually, in a way, was the kind of grounds of it, but it wasn't that was going to cause me to take the muse more seriously, I think, sadly, but that's not a criticism of the thing, meditation, Buddhism, Dharma, or Tree Runner. It was just me, so.
no, I didn't think it was, but I was quite interested in what they, how they kind of rubbed up against each other, or how, to what extent both sides were necessary, and how they informed each other. I don't know if that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I feel that all the way through, like I think for most of us here, there's been a sense for me of sort of trying to find something mysterious, trying to uncover something, and it's quite difficult to do, isn't it? Whether it be in terms of the more conventional spiritual life, or in terms of a creative life, right? And then also there is this thing about what are you going to contribute? Part of the whole ideal of the spiritual life, isn't it, is that, okay, you've got to do some work on yourself, but actually after a certain amount of time, working on yourself isn't going to make any difference. No. You've got to actually, contribute. And I think that I didn't know how to contribute, or I was thinking I had to contribute in some specific way, maybe teach meditation or be part of, the way to do it was to be part of a team, or, live in a certain way. And I know that was never prescribed, but I think I absorbed a bit of that along the way. And actually what I realized in the end was that for me, the most important thing was to contribute to the culture. And I think that's been my mission since, and that's when I feel happiest, if I'm actually contributing. I feel like I'm contributing to culture, whether through music or radio or projects or whatever. That I feel happiest and feel like I'm actually useful if that's what I'm doing. And it took me quite a while to kind of unhinge from the idea that I should be something else, like you are, everybody knows this about you. You are a wonderful meditation teacher. You're a poet, you live it. And I think in a way, you would have been a sort of, one of the kind of mentors or sort of archetypes for me about how I might be myself, but it just took me a long time to actually find out my way of doing it, I think. And in the end, it seemed to come down to that, contributing to culture.
It's so interesting, isn't it? That this, again, another perhaps creative tension between working on oneself, and this altruism or contribution, contributing, and that getting that balance right, isn't it, somehow? Because there's dangers in ignoring either, isn't there? You know, that you can become kind of narcissistic in a spiritual sense, can't you? Or you can, you know, ignore the inner life and just end up, well, I don't know quite what you end up if you think of the music industry. Of course, a lot of people end up in a real bad way, don't they, at some point, you know.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's why I've kind of always tried to stay on the edge of it. And I think, listen, I've got my tendency in life is to become shallow. I mean, it's like that's my it's a constant. Well, I was going to say it's a constant battle not to be shallow, but most of the time I don't bother battling. What actually has happened with me repeatedly is that I've become more shallow and then had what I would call an anima wake up. So, you know, I've got it's obviously if you're involved in the music industry, it's easy to become shallower and shallower. But I'd actually, in terms of Narcissus, of course, if you think about with Narcissus, he falls in love with his reflection. Where's the reflection? The reflection is on the surface, right? He thinks he's looking in the depths at some other boy. He's not looking in the depths. He's actually reflecting on the surface, the shallows. You know, he's absorbed in the shallows, and it's for sure that's always a temptation, isn't it? So I've been blessed by getting kicked in the balls regularly.
So you mentioned the anima a few times, haven't you? And I wonder, is it worth saying what you mean by that, or can we assume everybody? Well, what does it mean for you, Leanna? You know, when you use the word anima, what?
But for me, animus, well, obviously anima means soul, you know, in a Jungian sense,
Yeah.
as does animus, but the anima is sort of female principle. So I think that, you know, without wishing to sort of go into my personal psychology, but I was a sort of narcissistic mummy's boy, right? So one of the things that happens in Triratna when I was around is that there was very well-intentioned efforts to get young men to grow up, right?
Yeah.
And which were valuable, bit crude but valuable. And I did some of that, and actually, that's a kind of male initiation of sorts that's missing, obviously, from our culture. But in my case, that wasn't going to cut it. So I had to get cut down to size, as it were, through romantic disaster. So I had a big romantic disaster in my early 20s, which I'm so grateful for. I mean, God, I'm so grateful for that. And then if that wasn't enough, I just ignored it, obviously, went back to my old ways, got ordained, you know, male initiation again, and came back, and then got massively anima initiated by another woman here. And I mean, I'm so grateful to her, actually. It seemed like a disaster at the time, but I mean, God, that was an amazing experience. It was, I fell from a mountain, and, you know, the mountain of southern Spain. And as I approached the ground opened up and I fell into an abyss. All the way down from the heights into a psychic abyss. And it went on remember, for 4 years or so, what would conventionally be called a mess, but it was amazing time as well. In terms of anima, in terms of what you were saying, you know what was amazing? Because the city itself became animated, right? That's where I actually really first started to deeply feel London and have a deeper sense of the city, you know, anima mundi, you could call it, anima in the world. The city literally became ensouled. It felt like the concrete and the asphalt became meaningful in some ways. Particular corners of the city became significant. I mean, I must have been a raving lunatic at the time, but I'm walking down King Street in Hammersmith feeling like a painful roar of energy was going through me, from Ealing. And that was really, I suppose, that when it kind of opened up this idea of, I mean, Chandra to mention it, sort of psychogeography, psyche, you know, soul and geography, place, you know, the spirit of the place. And so that took me out of the shallows into the depths, and you know, it's been years. So sorry, I'm waffling here. I beg your pardon.
No,
Shut up.
I was just being reminded you wrote that lovely piece once about the River Fleet, was it? You know, going down into the London sewers, didn't you? Yeah,
I did.
Yeah, that's a lovely bit of writing.
I visited the sewers, River Fleet, which is really the Fleet sewer underneath Clerkenwell, and it was a sort of metaphorical journey, a bit like the Styx or something, really. And it was really coming out from that I started to you know, did the Real Tuesday World and all that stuff. So when I say anima initiation, it sounds a bit grand or grandiose, but that's what I meant, I suppose, in a sense, that the kind of maleness of the way my one-sided approach to the spiritual life was not going to cut it. So yeah, learned my lesson. So it's happened repeatedly since.
Well, you're never too old for it, as I found out. But yeah. I mean, it seems we don't just have the one initiation, do we? You know, maybe we need an initiation for each kind of stage of our life.
Well, thanks for saying that, because I think that's totally true, and I think that's it. You're absolutely spot on. We need to be initiated in each stage.
I think sometimes, you know, you can have your, you know, if you, I mean, I don't want, you know, talking about young men, you know, those that you do need to be initiated into the world of men, don't you? But you also need to find your way back to the feminine in a way.
I think so. And in a way, you could say it's the same thing. The fact that we're not maybe initiated, you know, maybe by our fathers in the way that it used to be, that we need both. Yeah. So, and I think you know, it's a bit obvious, isn't it? Masculine, feminine, all that. But I mean, that's what it felt like. I think that's what it felt like. And also, sorry, go on.
No. Go on.
No, I was going to say that I just like your thing about that you need an initiation for each stage of your life, because you know, meeting Nick's my partner, and you know, having two kids was an initiation into adulthood, which I'm so grateful for, really. So different stages, yeah. So
yeah, I mean, having a child is another initiation, isn't it? For sure.
Yeah. And then, you know, more recently, as we know, I've been initiated by other things. So anyway, there we go. We've got 8 minutes left, Chandra Das has told me.
Oh
yeah.
My God, time flies. What would I want? Well, I wanted to very briefly, I mean, it's very hard with you, mathematically, because you've done so much, but this role of you as an impresario, aren't you, a bit? Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you make me sound like P.T. Barnum or something there, with a sort of top hat and a whip. But I mean, I'm impresario is possibly a little bit grand. Yeah, I sort of style myself as a cultural curator. So what we've been doing for the last 10 years is putting on a lot of events. We do London Month of the Dead, an annual festival which is devoted to sort of death in the city. We do a kind of rolling program of talks and events, cultural events, literary events. and various project-based stuff. So really, I've moved. I mean, I'm still involved in the music industry, but I mean, we move more and more into the wider arts world.
You got a lovely thing with it. You still doing the London Eye thing? That was a lovely event.
Yeah, well, we did. That was right. So we took over the London Eye and filled it with the 32 capsules with speakers. Yeah, for 32 different talks simultaneously. That isn't going on anymore, unfortunately. The London Eye changed management, so they weren't as far-reaching as they were. But we do. I mean, pre-COVID, obviously, our events were in person, but we do a lot of things online at the moment. You know, we do Salon for the City, which is been going for 10 years now. It's a monthly event about London, looking at London through a different lens each month. We do talks about London artists and, you know, various other projects. I suppose in a way, without wishing it to make it too grand, is that's what I meant when I talked about contributing to culture.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it really. And that's what I meant. Yeah.
And for the last few years, you've been doing deaf conversations, haven't you? Deaf cafe conversations at West London. Yes,
right. So the last few years, as you know, we did Death Conversation Cafe, which is Death Cafe. Really, we can't use the phrase Death Cafe because it's held in an actual Buddhist centre, and Death Cafe itself, which is not, you know, is a wonderful thing around the world. It needs to be it needs to be secular, but that's a way of meeting monthly with a group of people, often strangers, not always, and talking about anything to do with mortality. And I'm sure some people here have been to Death Cafe or Death Conversation Cafe, but we hope to be back at West London Buddhist Centre with them post-COVID, and that's a wonderful creative, you know, man. I mean, it's a wonderful creative space, isn't it? I mean, it's an extraordinary, you know, within a few minutes, you have people who don't even know each other talking about one of the most intimate things in their lives, which is the end of it.
It is, no, it's always moving. It's always, yeah, well, sometimes funny, isn't it? Sometimes moving.
Quite funny, quite moving, always life affirming. You know, you always feel like you always leave there with a slight skip in your step and a resolve, and the resolve to do better. Be kinder.
Well, that's the other thing. We haven't got time, but I think that's been very important for you in recent years, hasn't it? This idea of being more loving, being more kind.
Yeah, you know, when my dad died, I didn't appear to feel any grief. I mean, I just didn't feel anything strongly at all. And then making an album about death and then doing Death Cafe and all these events about death came out of that in a way. And actually, I sort of give my dear old dad the credit for he initiated me after he died. Left it quite late. Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Is what did you talk about, that Alice Coltrane track? I haven't got it here, unfortunately, but what was that favourite Alice Coltrane track of yours?
Oh, I was talking about her version of Love Supreme.
The Love Supreme, yeah.
She does a version of it, yeah.
Yeah, so being kinder, that's always the thing, isn't it?
I think it always is a thing, isn't it? Yeah. There's always there's always more potential, isn't there?
Yes.
Like all these things, we never get to the end of any of this, really, do we?
No, it's a good start, though, isn't it? Being kind.
A very good start. Yeah.
I also, you probably forgot this actually, but you always just as we get into the end, I probably should pass on one of your many bon mots of wisdom. You said to me once, you might have forgotten this, but you said, if you can't change anything else, get your hair cut. And I feel that at the moment, because given COVID, because I can't get to the bloody barbers.
You should do what I say.
I can see yours is shaved.
You You know, someone said to me, I was on, I was doing something on Zoom. I think it had ended, you know. As I said, I put my blanket. I'll do it for you. You might. I put my blanket over my head, and he said, "Oh, you look like Marty Feldman." Do you remember Marty Feldman?
Yeah, that's not a compliment.
No, anyway.
But that was I've always taken that with me. If you can't change anything else, have your hair cut. That's
I don't remember that one, but
you've done so many. I'll tell you another one of yours. I know we've got to end, but I know another one of yours, which I still do. Right? Is that you always said this as well. It's a bit of magic in your life. Always fold your clothes before you go to bed.
Oh yeah.
So I always do that. So I did. I have learned a few things from you.
Yeah, well, that comes from the late great Trungpa, Chogyam Trungpa. When he's talking about, I think it's called Dreda in Tibetan Buddhism. It means magic, but one of the things he talks about is just taking care of your possessions, you know. By just putting things away neatly and stuff. You know. With certain respect for your own possessions, but also, I suppose that whole thing, and that we haven't got time for it, have we? But that whole thing about finding soul in the city, which, you know, very hard, people won't know, but your feeling for London is extraordinary. You know much more. I mean, I was born in London, you know, I'm a Londoner, but your feeling and knowledge of London is so much more, got so much more depth than my own in a way. And but that whole re-enchanting of a city, you know, we're a bit obsessed now with the wild, aren't we? We wild and everything. But of course, cities are wild in their own way, aren't they?
They are indeed. To reanimate the city. Yeah, absolutely. Which means bring the soul back into it. Paramananda, I know we are out of time, and because I feel like I want to get it in there quite quickly before the end, because I'm super grateful to you, apart from the fact we've been friends for a very long time. When I came along to West London, I wouldn't have stuck around if it hadn't been for you. And I think that for many years, that was one of even the difficult times. The fact that you were around sort of kept me connected. And I really appreciate that. And I've sort of learned a lot from you, not just about haircuts and folding your clothes, but from the way you are. And I'll say one thing, it's amazing, you know, you've been losing your sight, but of all the people I know, you are one of the most stoical, and this city that you mentioned can be a very alarming place. And if you can't see, I know it's quite alarming, and I salute you for that. And I've really benefited from knowing you. So I want to put it on record right now that I appreciate that. And I love you, so I want to put that on record right now.
Well, I love you, Matthew, but you can put it on one of your X-rays.
I'll cut it onto an X-ray, okay. Look, that's my book, by the way. There we go, with an X-ray.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, go on.
Do a quick plug for my book. Yeah, I'm going to cut your love onto an X-ray.
Yeah. Well, what a lovely start. We've started with Ella and we've finished with that. That's very lovely. Thanks so much for coming, Matthew, agreeing to do this. Very nice to speak with you.
Thanks very much for inviting me, and it was an honour, pleasure.
Hey, thanks to you both. Really beautiful to end up with two men as fine as you telling each other they love each other live on the internet. Who knew that would be the kind of legacy of COVID, right? You just get these opportunities to do kind of remarkably intimate conversations where people just feel that free to say that. It's been really quite moving listening to you. I wish we had several more hours where you could just wind your way into a relationship with us kind of being voyeurs or auditors or whatever the equivalent of a voyeur is when you're listening. Pabamati, we'll do a plug for your book. We'll send everybody a link to your book. You can send me the direct link afterwards. Looks
Well,
beautiful.
actually, this one's sold out, but I've just put in the draft of the next one, so I can, in due course, yeah. If people want to know more about that particular project, I'll send you the link, Chandradasa. It's a fascinating story, yeah.
That's great. I'll email everybody afterwards with a set of links about this. In the chat, I've put a link to our podcast, so we're going to release edited versions of all these podcast conversations, and you can subscribe to the podcast there. As ever, everything we do on the Buddhist Centre Online is by donation, which we kind of do as a sort of ethical statement in a way. It's quite a lot of pressure on all of Triratna's teams at the moment to try and find ways to fund themselves when the physical centres are closed. And basically, we're completely committed to giving things away. So we want people to come and take part in Dharma communities, and we really don't care whether they can afford it or not, personally. At the same time, we've got a team of people we need to support. So if you are able to give something, I'll post a little link in the chat right now. And you can tick the little box beside the donation button and choose this event. And that'll be another way to help support Paramanda in a small way too. But yeah, please feel free just to come to any of our events ever. And we know lots of people are going through quite a lot of economic challenge through the pandemic, and the vaccinations are not just going to end that. There'll be a bit of a strange realignment economically ahead for everybody. So we're going to keep being here, hopefully offering some good cultural stuff and some good meditation and Dharma practice events for you just to participate in, come and be community. So I'd like to thank Pabamati again. I wish we had longer just to hear more of the psychogeography of your own mind, actually, just the kind of electating stuff that I resonated with around the effect of getting ordained in the mountains and then falling into the abyss, particularly through romantic disaster, which I recognise personally. And it's a story as old as the mountains. And
Yes.
all the different levels of the ways that we are animated or reanimated, the way the city's animated. Thanks for that. And thanks to you, Paramanda, as ever, just for curating this space. Anyway, I love the fact that you can curate a space through friendship fundamentally, which is what you're doing for us. Just calling all your friends to you and sharing your connection with them, your love for them. It's very beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.